Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We're going to have to get back to the Michael Bannon story, and we will, because we have to adjudicate that case based on what we know to this point. But we've got a lot of other matters to on our docket as well, including DACA. And on that issue, one Steve Bannon, the Sith Lord. He speaketh. He's on 60 Minutes this Sunday. Sat down with Charlie Rose. And, of course, they're teasing out portions of the interview where Steve Bannon speaks very frankly about the Catholic Church, about the secular political leadership in Congress. And here's what he had to say when it pertains to the church and the church's support of DACA.
Look what he did on DACA the other day. Okay, I don't agree with that DACA decision, but I understand how he struggled with it. I understand how he's giving a possibility of a legislative thing, and he said even last night in a tweet, he would rethink it. Trust me, the guys on the far right, the guys on the conservative side are not happy with this.
Can I remind you, a good Catholic, that Cardinal Dolan is opposed to what's happening with DACA? Cardinal Dolan.
The Catholic Church has been terrible about this.
Okay, fair.
The bishops have been terrible about this. By the way, you know why? You know why? Because unable to really to come to grips with the problems in the church, they need illegal aliens. They need illegal aliens to fill the churches. It's obvious on the face of it. That's what the entire Catholic bishops condemning. They have an economic interest. They have an economic interest in unlimited immigration, unlimited illegal immigration. And as much as
Boy, that's a tough thing to say about your church.
As much as I respect Cardinal Dolan and the bishops on doctrine, this is not doctrine. This is not doctrine at all. I totally respect the Pope, and I totally respect the Catholic bishops and cardinals on doctrine. This is not about doctrine. This is about the sovereignty of a nation. And in that regard, they're just another guy with an opinion.
I got to tell you, I wouldn't call myself a good Catholic. I'm an aspiring good Catholic, but I agree with Bannon on that. If I want to hear from Cardinal Supich, or frankly Cardinal Dolan or Pope Francis, I want to hear from them about the catechism.
Not social issues or immigration issues?
Well, there's no expertise as labor economists, as Cardinal Supich plays sometimes with the $15 minimum wage They're not climatologists, as many of the bishops play when they talk about climate change.
But isn't Christianity about helping the less fortunate and people that have been living in the shadows, living in fear of getting deported? Don't they need our prayers and support?
Of course they do. So now that we've said that's our mission, we have a policy discussion about how to achieve that mission. Okay. And that's what Bannon is saying. And he's right. Now, Cardinal Dolan, who's, of course, the Archbishop of New York, said in response to Bannon's comments, quote, "I don't really care to go into what I think is a preposterous and rather insulting statement that the only reason we bishops care for immigrants is for the economic because we want to fill our churches and get more money. That's insulting, and it's just so ridiculous it does not merit a comment." All right. Well,
which is a comment.
Hopefully we can solicit comments from our next guest, because that's what we do on this show. And he is, of course, our friend Andy McCarthy, contributing editor to National Review, former federal prosecutor. He has written a piece to end DACA, follow the Constitution, which I think we should discuss with him. Andy, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. So to end DACA, follow the Constitution, well, that implies that DACA has not been ended. And from everything I've heard from the big government press corps in D.C., DACA has been ended, and we should all be hysterical, and Donald Trump is a racist tyrant.
Well, DACA hasn't been ended. We are hysterical, and I don't think Trump is a racist tyrant, but I don't think he cares much about the Constitution.
Okay. So let me follow your argument. DACA has not been ended, but if you want to end it in an orderly fashion, which is the pronouncement by the administration through Jeff Sessions this week, 6 months to act.
That's not following the Constitution. That's why what Trump should have done is what he said he was going to do during the campaign, which is end it on the first day.
Okay.
He should have ended it on the first day. Why?
Because
Well,
it's unconstitutional.
first of all, because he said he would, so there is something to be said for that,
Okay.
no? But secondly, the way that you do that, the reason for ending DACA is that DACA violated the Constitution in two ways. First, it gave positive legal benefits to illegal aliens, which the president doesn't have the power under the Constitution to do. It's not a question of whether we think, as a policy matter, that we're sympathetic to the idea that these people should get work permits and the ability to attend school. There's a lot of people who might believe that. I may very well be one of them, at least if the category of the so-called dreamers were drawn narrowly enough. But whatever we think policy-wise, that's a power of Congress. It's not a power of the president. The president doesn't have the power to do that. So if you're going to end DACA because DACA is unconstitutional, by what authority do you continue it for the last 8 months, and by what authority do you continue it for the next 6 months? If the issue is that the president doesn't have the power to do this, then how does he continue the program?
He doesn't have the power to continue it. Yeah, okay.
Right. So the issue is, what do you do about it? Number one, you say, we're not going to issue any new work permits, and we're not going to continue registering people for other legal benefits under the program, not because we think you people don't merit it, but because the president doesn't have the power to do this. Congress has to do this. And secondly, you do an honest constitutional application of prosecutorial discretion, not what Obama did, and if I can explain the difference. Prosecutorial discretion is just a resource allocation doctrine. We have more crime than we have resources to prosecute crime, so you have to prioritize which ones you are going to give the most attention to and which get little or no attention. And what I think Trump could have said is that we're going to assign a low enforcement priority to people who are in the dreamer category, but doing prosecutorial discretion the right way, that's going to be actually decided on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, but he didn't do that, and that created hysteria throughout the country, especially with the 800,000 people and their family and friends who did not want them deported.
Right. Well, I don't understand. If they're hysterical, they're hysterical. But the fact of the matter is, nobody's going to be deported.
Yeah, but I'm saying President Trump should have been judicious and humanitarian in a way that he said it. It seemed just to, put everybody on edge and wonder who's going to come knocking at the door.
How would that have been if he did it on day one without a window of opportunity? It would have been much more hysteria. Do we determine what we do as a matter of law based on the amount of hysteria in the body politic? That's a silly way to govern, isn't it?
Well, but we got people who are going to be hysterical no matter what, and the fact that Trump is the overlay here will make them even more hysterical. And I think the only thing that you can do is do the right thing under the Constitution the best way you can, and hope that, notwithstanding the fact that you are assured in this climate to get overwrought, hysterical overreaction, that over time, as people see that you're enforcing the law properly and humanely, that the hysteria dies down and people start to realize, gee, this wasn't as bad as they said.
Okay, but if Congress acts as they have indicated they will, because this really gets them animated, the ordinary concerns of longstanding American citizens don't get them quite as excited. But they're excited about this. So if they act and they pass something approximating the DREAM Act, something that provides for permanent status to the DACA designees, that is not a constitutional problem, is it?
No, of course it's not. In fact, I don't think now that they will enact anything, because the thing to do here, to my mind, the smart thing to do here was to drop the program as Trump said he was going to do it, and to do it in the way I described, and then to use the sympathy that is widespread for something like the DREAM Act in a compromise over immigration, which gets you some tighter border controls and tighter immigration enforcement. Unfortunately, with his tweets of the last couple of days and the deal that he's cut with Pelosi and Schumer and the new bipartisanship that he seems to be trying to forge, I think what he's done is give away all of his leverage here. So if I were the Democrats, what I would tell the Republicans, either codify, that is, enact the DREAM Act with no compromises, just do it flat out that way, or Trump has basically said he'll revisit this in 6 months if Congress hasn't acted. So if you're the Democrats, why would you negotiate? Because you know that either of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to get everything you want legislatively, or Trump is going to continue this program just like Obama did.
Well, right. I mean, yeah, you may not need to negotiate, though, with Republicans. I mean, that may be their advantage. They have kind of full-on surrender from the majority of the Republican caucuses.
Well, look, we know that between the Washington establishment Republicans and the Democrats, there's certainly enough votes in Congress to pass something like the DREAM Act, which is why we on the right, who are interested in border security and immigration controls, wanted this negotiated in a way that you didn't give away all your leverage, and we got things like E-Verify and better border security and some of the things that are in the Cotton-Purdue legislation. And I think right now, the way this is played, it's not going to happen.
But don't you think President Trump sided with the Democrats to further and to push Hurricane Harvey relief?
No, I don't think the Democrats would have stopped Hurricane Harvey relief if push came to shove. I think Trump sided with the Democrats because he didn't like the press coverage he was getting, and nothing for someone who cares more about coverage than policy. There's nothing on earth better than being a Republican who bashes other Republicans while accommodating Democrats. So I expect to see more of it.
Well, that's true. He's taken a page out of the McCain book, hasn't he? He wanted to just switch topics, get your take on this. This used to be a story just a couple of weeks ago. It's not much of a story anymore. Even the big government press corps in D.C. seems to be losing interest and diminishing the resources they contribute to covering the Russian collusion story. Yesterday, FBI Director Christopher Wray said, I can say very confidently that I have not detected any whiff of interference with that investigation, referring to the Russian collusion investigation. Another NBC story about the meeting between Jared Kushner and Don Jr. and the Russian attorney, that regarding campaign donations has fallen apart, so they're kind of quietly walking away from that. And Don Jr.'s statement released to the New York Times got a copy of it yesterday. It basically says, I took that meeting because I was looking for information about Hillary's fitness for office. Okay, fine, that's politics. So what is the status of the Russian collusion investigation? It seems pretty clear that, yeah, they may get Manafort for financial violations of the law that are unrelated to the Trump campaign. They may get Michael Flynn for violations related to his business practices. But they're not anywhere close to anything resembling what has been alleged of President Trump or those in his inner circle.
Well, I've always thought that as far as collusion is concerned, that unless you had two things, you have very strong evidence that they haven't put out to this point, that Russia actually is clearly responsible for the theft of the information. And I am of a mind to accept the intelligence community's pronouncement on this, but the fact that I would accept that or we would accept it, and whether they could prove it in a court of law, two entirely different things. So if they don't put out strong evidence of that, you're dealing on a rickety foundation to begin with. And then the second element they would need is some indication that there was knowing cooperation in that specific espionage effort by people connected to the Trump campaign. And I don't think there's ever been a scintilla of evidence for that. Now, all that said, Mueller has hired, 15, 16? This special counsel thing is like the biggest government employment project in years.
Sure, got to keep those
so he's hired lots and lots of very aggressive, very smart, very left-leaning prosecutors, and they have subpoena power and they have grand jury power, and they are combing through people's financial records and all that stuff. And the history of these special counsel investigations is that they don't necessarily end at the same place where they start, right? They don't end up prosecuting the crime that was the justification for having the special counsel in the first place. But, somewhere down the road they find somebody did something, and because there's a lot of pressure on them to bring some charge to justify their existence, they often do that. So I don't think, if I were Trump and the people around him, I wouldn't feel out of the woods yet. But I've never really thought there was much to the collusion story.
All right. He is Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor and contributing editor to National Review Online. You check out his most recent piece on DACA. To end DACA, follow the Constitution at nationalreview.com. Andy, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a great weekend.
You too.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the